Coming up this week, we have our good friend Derek Watson, who's here to talk about podcasts. You can check out his podcast. It's the DW podcast. And this week we talk about the lockdown, the madness of the Motherwell Beer Festival, what makes a good podcast, a view from the terrace. Is it terrace or terraces, by the way? What is
terrace.
it? A view from the terrace. Our podcast, the last form of entertainment. Amanda Knox, podcast production. The Young Team by Graham Armstrong. Pod versus VOD. Drunk Therapy. Alexa. Banger or Saint with Adam Curry and David Weiner, Louis Theroux, Joe Rogan, Tony Watt, Blind Boy and Lemmy. So let's go.
Welcome to episode 22 of the COVID Curer podcast, which may contain some bad language. This podcast is on Spotify, Apple, YouTube and Anchor. We are a wedding band from Scotland who are doing this podcast while on lockdown. My name is Martin, I play guitar in the band. I'm joined by our lead singer David Swan.
Hello again.
We've got our bass player Mark Caulfield.
Hi there.
And our drummer Neil McDougall.
Hello.
And we've also got a special guest tonight, creator and host of the DW podcast, described by the Daily Record as one of the hottest podcasts in Scotland. In its first year, this podcast has already had a multitude of high-profile guests from across Scotland and the rest of the world, including Sanjeev Kholi, Stuart Braitwaithe and Amanda Knox. As well as a fellow podcaster, this week's guest is also a fellow musician who plays bass with one of the biggest bands from Lanarkshire, Motherwell four-piece, the Banter Thiefs. A massive welcome to Derek Watson. Welcome, Derek.
Welcome, mate.
Thanks very much for having us on, guys. Delighted to be here, and I've been really enjoying your podcast today. So I was dead chuffed when I got a wee message to come on.
Thanks
you,
a lot for coming on. How's life during lockdown for you?
It's going all right. It's going okay. Do you know, I hate moaning, but it is a bit brutal, isn't it? You know, like all this sitting in the house and working from home and doing things like this over the internet, like everything just seems to revolve around sitting in front of a computer screen these days, rather than being out there and listening to live music or speaking to people face to face. But listen, with this vaccine coming, you'd like to think that things are on the up, and hopefully you boys will be back playing music soon as well.
That's the dream. Aye, that's what we're all hoping for.
Give an hour of your time, mate, and we'll knock that positivity right out of you. You're absolutely right. It needs to come back now. Apparently on the news there's another variant or strain, but let's hope it's not going to affect the vaccines and we'll all get back. Can I ask, Derek, DW, is it the drums? Is that...
No, it's just my initials. It's just Derek Watson.
Oh,
it's probably
fuck, right enough.
It's probably the least imaginative podcast name I could have possibly come up with. But once I'd recorded one or two with that name, I thought, well, I need to stick with it now. Do you know what I mean? Should probably have had a better ring to it for the start, but not just my initials. Nothing exciting.
Just because you're playing the Banter Thiefs and stuff like that, you guys use sees a lot in the local press and stuff like that. How's things going with you boys?
Quite quiet just now, to be honest. I suppose like most bands, I think we had great ideas recording a new EP at the start of next year, and to be honest, we've just not got into the studio together to do that. We rehearse in a place called One Eyed Dog in Motherwell.
So do we, yeah.
And as you'll know then, it's been shut for a bit of time, and then it's reopened again, and then it's been shut again, and just in line with the government guidelines. So to be honest, we've been really, really quiet and not had much coming up. We were meant to be going over to Holland in April this year and doing a few gigs over there, and that was just when all this kind of kicked off. So since then it's been sitting about the house doing absolutely nothing and thinking what will we do next year. But I'd imagine many bands are in the same position as well.
Aye, big shout out to John for the One Eyed Dog and the Beagles. John and the Beagles.
Hello, John.
And it's tough for
a band.
It's tough for bands and stuff, musicians, but it's also tough for guys like John as well, that they're on the practice rooms and in the studios and stuff, and it's a difficult time for them. I think as musicians, it's difficult directly, but indirectly, you know, all the other things that, like music shops. I seen a wee thing that strung out guitars in Glasgow had some gear nicked the other day or something. So
30 grand's worth.
aye, I know, and it's tough enough with that kind of carry on, you know. So aye, tough for everybody. And it's good to. I think they're back open now. The One-Eyed Dog.
Back open at the moment. Aye, I seen that. Actually.
Right.
Yeah. Aye, back open.
It's just such a tough time for them, as you say, and for me, it's like these people like John. You know, they're the beating heart of, you know, the industry in our community. You know, without a practice 100%. Space like that, there'd be even less bands than there already is at the moment. You know, it feels to me that, I don't know, maybe this is unfair to say, but it seems to me that it's people like ourselves that have been playing music for years that are still doing it, and you don't see as many new musicians coming through, or younger musicians.
Definitely.
Well, my boys' band, 2020, they're using it. Aye, they're in there. Did you do something with the boys for 2020? Like, I thought I'd seen.
We were going to do a gig this year with them, I believe, and then never really get round to it. Aye, but
with all of this happening. Because Keane, my boy who plays bass in the band, mentioned that when I mentioned you were coming on.
Aye.
Did you do the beer festival as well this year?
We done it last year, yeah.
How did that go? Maybe we've done that a couple of times. How did that go for you?
It's alright. It's a strange crowd, I think.
It is, isn't it?
It might be alright for you guys, you know, because you have got a great catalogue of tunes and you know what to play to the audience. And
I don't know about that.
But we're up there playing mainly our own tunes, you know, we don't do many covers because we'll murder them, to be perfectly honest. And see, people in there just want to listen to things that they know. You know, I feel anyway, they want to dance to tunes that they know, and when you're going up there and playing songs, they're like, who are these guys? You don't know any of the Beatles or Oasis or something like that, you know.
Aye, did you not even fling one in for them or anything? Was it all originals?
It was all originals, aye.
But do you know what? That's what you guys are, so screw them. And I bet you your fans all loved it. I mean, I think Keane's been at a couple of your gigs and he says it's great. The gigs are brilliant and bouncing, and you know, so aye.
I think that's one of the
hard
benefits
to do,
that
though,
we've had.
as you say, though, it's hard to do.
That's one of the benefits, you know, is we've always had people coming along to see us, you know, and people that tend to do know our songs that are coming along, so it's not like we're playing to a totally new audience each time, but certainly at something like that at the beer festival, I don't think people are necessarily going along to hear the music, they're going along to drink the beer, and the music's a second thought. So
aye, I remember we've done two, haven't we? We've done two beer festivals, is that right?
We've played the Civic a couple of times.
We've done two beer festivals, I'm sure we've done two beer festivals, right? I think the first one we were on really early, and the last one we were like the very last band. The second time we were the very last band, and I can remember playing the first one going, this was alright, but it was a wee bit empty because we were quite at the start. And then the year that we were like, oh, we're headlining. And we're like, this is going to be amazing. We're going to have the whole of Lanarkshire in one place, steaming, and it's just going to be like the biggest party ever. But everybody leaves at 10:30 to get last order, so we need to be in the middle. You need to be in the middle.
Absolutely. I'm sure we went on early once, and because we've played it a couple of times as well, and you don't want to be that first one on because folk aren't drunk enough yet. You know, they're not ready for it. Whereas, as you say, in the middle, people have heated up a bit and they're ready to dance.
Aye, that's optimum.
They start drinking at that. I'm sure it's like 12:30 in the day.
Aye.
So you need it's quite tricky to time that nice way at the sweet spot of like drunkenness, because it's an early start for people as well. But it's a great venue.
I remember they used to do it round about the same time, because it used to be October, I think, and it used to be around about the same time as the international games with the football, and I'm sure they showed the Scotland games many years ago, and then it would turn into an absolute riot by about 8 o'clock because folk were pissed.
Too drunk.
Aye.
Too drunk, that's it. If there's something in Motherwell like that starts off at midday, you're only getting 4 or 5 hours out of that. You're as well closing it at 5 o'clock, do you know what I mean?
Get folk up to their bed.
Definitely. But it's a good gig, good venue. I like the big, stage and all the monitors and all that kind of stuff. It's good. Felt a wee bit intimidating the first time on it when you're used to be in corners of pubs and stuff like that, and going out onto a big Civic stage was a bit, everybody's miles away.
Absolutely.
Even the band,
I think they've done really well recently to be attracting, bigger bands as well to Motherwell. I don't know if that's maybe because people aren't buying music as much, so bands are thinking we need to do more tour dates on our tour. Yeah. We'll maybe go to the towns around the big cities rather than just the big cities, because they had the Proclaimers not long ago, they had the DMAs.
Yeah.
I can't
Did
remember.
they not have
the vaccines played as well?
That's what I was going to say. Keane went to
Aye.
that one. And was another
the
big one
Snuts,
as well.
the Snuts were the other band played
as well. And I mean, I took a bunch of him and his mates down to that, and it was absolutely chocker. That's the busiest I've ever seen it. And the guys that work there, I don't know if Fraser still works there, and who's the other boy that does the kind of organisation. They've really got their act together. They guys, young guys that know what the people are looking for, which is great, instead of just, a magician for the 1980s coming up and doing a wee act. It's actually up and coming bands that they're trying to promote, which is great.
We had the pleasure of playing last year, I think it was the year before, with the La Fontaine's in there as well at the headline show, and
amazing.
It's absolutely brilliant. People were in early because I suppose because it was all local bands that were playing, but when the La Fontaine's were on at the end, it was absolutely bouncing. Wall to wall, you couldn't get moving, and to see a band from Motherwell headline it to a few thousand people I just thought it was really special for them.
They're brilliant.
Definitely.
I think their new album's amazing. I love Jamie's vocal on the new album. Some of his
melodic
choruses are
Jamie
amazing,
on,
man. Give him a shout. He was at one of your gigs in October, wasn't he? Up in Shots. I met him at one of your gigs.
He's trying to help us pack the van.
He does, aye.
Just turns up randomly everywhere. Wherever there's a party, probably.
Aye, that sounds about right.
I know.
Drying them out a bit in the hot pan, and I'm ready to set to with my mechanical masher. Now I'm aiming for quite a solid mash at this stage, but I still need a bit of milk, full fat. I've warmed in the microwave. A bit of milk, full fat. I've warmed in the microwave. A bit of milk, full fat. I've warmed in the microwave. The microwave.
Part of the reason we'd asked you to come on, Derek, is because your podcast is doing really well. I've been tuning in to some of the episodes. It's really good, and we thought we would do a loose theme on this every week, so we thought it might be an opportunity just to talk about podcasts and stuff, because that seems to be the big thing now. So we're going to ask you a couple of questions and then maybe just kind of spread it out and see where we go. So the thing I was going to ask was, what makes a good podcast, in your opinion, Derek?
An interesting one, because I feel that with podcasts you're either into them or you're no. Like, I feel sometimes when I tell people I do a podcast, they look at me as if I'm an alien. It's like people are so judgmental of them. I think either you're into podcasts or you're no. Maybe that's me being unfair, but it almost reminds me like when you started off playing in bands, right, and you used to try and get your mates to come to gigs, and you're trying to sell tickets. Remember, you used to do these pay to play gigs or whatever when you were younger. And you know that you're selling tickets to folk that don't really want to be there, but they'll maybe just come for a night out. And I think sometimes a podcast like that, if you say to somebody that's into podcasts like yourself, I've got this podcast, and they'll probably give it a go. Yeah. But there's some people that are just so against it.
Aye. It's quite weird, that, isn't it?
Aye. I don't know if that's maybe me being unfair, but that's just what I've picked up.
No, definitely my experience of it as well. I've been listening to podcasts for a few years, quite religiously. Every time I'm in the car, that's what I'll put on, podcasts and stuff. And see when you discover a new one and you're like that, I'm dead excited to tell folk about this. And see when you tell somebody that they're like that, what, a podcast? You just listen to a guy talking shite. I'm like, you've no idea how good some of these are, But I totally get that, mate. Totally get that. And it's not even as if it's in its infancy. Do you know what I mean? It's not just something that's new that people don't really know much about, which is quite strange. But it's starting to come more mainstream now, isn't it?
Honestly, I listen to more podcasts than I listen to music.
I would say so, me too.
I'm the same,
aye.
Aye, definitely.
What makes a good one? I mean, it's a hard question because everybody's so subjective, isn't it? I suppose it depends what you're into, but I like to listen to podcasts mainly about things that I'm into, I suppose, like music or sports or football or anything along those lines. And I think what makes them good is when they're not too long and when they don't take themselves too seriously as well.
Aye.
I've listened to some podcasts and I just think that they're taking themselves too seriously, and I think I can't listen to this. You want to go on, and for me anyway, I want to switch off. I want to just feel as if I'm in that zone and feel as if I'm having the conversation with the people, like I'm getting to know them.
You're in the room with them, yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, absolutely.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I think what Blind Boy calls it is the podcast hug.
That's it.
You can get like a podcast hug, and there's definitely something about that, especially his, because he's got the jazz music playing in his Cork accent, like soft in a mic. You're kind of getting a warm, when he tells a story, it's like
it's a kind of ASMR vibe with him.
There's a bit of that
honestly.
about it.
Aye, definitely.
It's like sitting in a nice pub in Ireland with a wee coal fire and a pint, and he's just sitting whispering in your ear all these mad stories, and it's just brilliant. That I love that. Really love that. Aye, definitely the podcast hug.
Yeah.
We're more like a podcast headbutt.
Do you think that comes down to the accent as well? Like you touched on Blind Boy there, and he's dead softly spoken, and then you've got 5 of us for Scotland sitting there sounding aggressive as if we're going to knock lumps out or something.
my mate Donnie Paul McDonald that was on, he just came on, and because I do another one with him, like a sports one, it's a bit more, it's not quite there yet, I would probably say, but it's also, it's like with ex-professional football players and stuff and people from around the world, and he doesn't speak with his accent, he just speaks really slowly, and it's like he came on this and was just FFCC, just like totally let himself loose. And he couldn't, when he listened it back, he's like, fucking hell, I really just let the accent go there, because he's been on the telly and that, and he gets told all the time to slow down and speak really clearly, because folk can't understand the Scottish accent for some reason.
Fuck
I
them.
know, fuck them.
If they can't keep up, fuck them. If
know,
they can't keep up, fuck them.
Paul's doing really well, and it's a funny point that, because I've done some podcasts with people from England or America, and I sometimes try and slow myself down or talk a bit clearer, and then see when I listen to it back, it's almost like the opposite of Paul. I'm like, I sound like a fucking dick. Like
I've listened to a few years, mate. No, I think you sound like you're now. You'd slow it down a wee bit, obviously, when it's somebody that's maybe English, and I think we would all do that, man. Yeah. But you certainly don't come across as you're changing your accent or anything like that.
I try not to, but there's a few words sometimes I've heard creep in there, and I'm thinking, oh, I don't like the sound of that. I don't like
an example of what? Well, geez one.
I can't even think. It's just that there's times where I listen to it back, and it's almost as if I'm just trying to be a bit too pronunciated, to make sure that they understand. And the reality is, they probably know exactly what they're saying anyway,
Aye, definitely, mate. They do.
I think when they'll have the headphones on and that, and it'll be coming through nice and clear and stuff. So it'll be, people will understand, definitely.
And you have a bit of banter with some of your guests about them doing Scottish accents and stuff like that as well, didn't you? There was one I watched. Who was the big guy? Bowling for Soup, dude.
That's it, Jarrett for Bowling for Soup.
Aye, him. And he was doing a Scottish accent, and that was quite funny. So, it can be a topic as well, to break the ice and stuff like that with these guys.
That's it. I think you always kind of want to bring it back to your audience as well, and keep it relevant. And as much as you're getting people on, for example, like Jarrett, who's from Texas, what do these people know about Scotland, and what's their opinion on it? And
good to find out.
Aye, because for me it breaks it up. You can get guests on and end up having the same conversation they've had 100 times, so I always try and make it a bit more conversational rather than just saying, oh, what's been happening, with your latest album or something, because they've probably told somebody that before.
Absolutely, man.
That's when it
that.
That's when I would say it gets interesting when you hear somebody talking to somebody who you're expecting to say an answer that you've probably heard before about a subject that you've heard them discuss before. It's nice to hear a wee bit more into their everyday life almost, if it's like just talking about some of the stuff you hear in podcasts. It is stuff you would probably not hear on like a documentary or if they were doing a radio interview.
Just a soundbite radio interview.
It's a wee glimpse into people's lives.
Yeah,
definitely. Just like this is what I do day to day. I think that's when it becomes interesting. I think as well, if you're listening to the same person again and again, like as in the same presenter, the same show, that kind of becomes like I find that much easier to get into as a series rather than like a Netflix type TV show, which I can never get into any of them. Okay. Whereas I think a podcast, you can kind of, because you don't need to focus in as much, maybe, I don't know. You
could leave 4, Merv, and then go back again, and you don't really need to watch the 4 again.
Aye.
You can do all that with podcasts. I leave podcasts like for maybe a year at a time, and then I'll get back to them, and I won't get back through the whole catalogue. I'll just pick up where they are. You couldn't do that with a Netflix TV series, that's the beauty of podcast. But forget all your amazing guests and all that. You've been on a view from the terrace, mate. You've been on that. That's amazing. That's one of my favourite programmes now. Whether actually BBC are starting to do that.
Have you heard their podcast? Have you listened to the
podcast? No. I've not yet, mate. I will check it out though. Is it good?
Their podcast's really good. So that actually started as a podcast before they got the TV show. And it came off the back of that, and the boys are great, because I just think that the coverage is totally different for your Daily Record or your Sons or
Thank God.
Aye, the
Thank
usual
God.
Scottish football stuff that you're getting churned out, where it's just all about headlines, you know. And for some people, that might be a bit boring what they do, because they're mad geeky Scottish football fans. Like, they'll talk about the lower leagues, and they'll talk about
I like that.
how many passes some Queen of the South players made in the past 3 months or something, you know. But it's interesting, and I think it shines a light on things that people aren't talking about.
Aye, and their passion for it is so clearly like genuine. You know, their passion for all of that is so clearly genuine that it just you can't help it but rub off on you. I think it's great. A lot of people take the cheap digs at stuff like that when young guys try to do something a bit different on the mainstream. And I think we've all been greeting for years at the formats of your sports scenes and all that kind of stuff. To have a raw, just guys off the street talking about it the way it is so brilliant for me that I think it's great. I think it's cheap digs some people have at it, and you know it's a bit lazy, you know, to a new thing, and we'll just dismiss it. But if you give it a bit of time, I think it's really good. But I'll check the podcast out as well, mate.
You should check them out. They're really good, and I think the thing you touched on it there. It's young guys or younger guys doing something new, and not to have a go at people that have been doing it for years and years, but I think sometimes that's the problem, you know, in the media, certainly in Scotland, is that it's been the same people in these positions for years and years, and it's not really been shooken up or shaked up, you know. It's been like, it's the same old faces getting the same gigs, and there's only so long that you can listen to that.
Absolutely, and they say the same stuff as well, to a point. Like, it's the same opinions for the same people about the same stuff, and it is 100%. Things should be shaking up, but I think that's maybe a wee bit of a difference between how difficult it would have been for people to make it in media back in the day, to get into the BBC or STV or any of that, or even the radio or whatever. Whereas now, in some ways, it's maybe easier because you can basically just fire up a mic and start talking shit like I'm now. But it's like maybe hopefully that kind of opens the avenues for people to just go and get involved themselves. You know what I mean?
I like the well, not so much for us, but not so much the guys because they're on mainstream media, but the removal of the handcuffs, where you can actually just come on and say what you want to fucking say. And I think people really relate to that. Well, that's what I do in my podcast. I really relate to somebody just telling it how it is, instead of that, you know, they would maybe need to curb that for getting on an interview with ITV or something like that. I think it's really good. So
you touched on the blind boy stuff there, Swanee, and that's exactly what he says, isn't it? You know, he's like, I'm my own boss here. I can say what I want, and if people want to advertise this, it's on my terms.
Absolutely.
You know, and that medium never used to exist. So now to allow people to actually say what they want without, you know, being subject to a board or a boss, it's look at his podcast, Derek. I mean, he's got millions of listens, and I would imagine there'll be sponsors chatting at his door, but he's actually keeping it for himself, you know, and he's doing the Patreon stuff, and he's like, I don't want to put the handcuffs on, which is great, because he actually said that, you know, a few times in his podcast. He's said, I've been approached by X and Y, and they'll say to him, but you can't talk about Irish nationalism and stuff like that. And he's like, well, that's what I want to talk about, you know. So he's like, I just refuse to do it. So I like that part of it as well.
Is podcasts the last remaining form of entertainment the world's going to see?
So I don't know if I am allowed to say this, but you guys sent me the questions over in advance, and I thought, what a question that is, by the way. Absolutely brilliant. Because I think there's a really interesting point in that. I think, you know, podcasts seem to be like growing and growing and growing, and no, I can't see anything else coming out at the same rate or at the same speed. But I don't think it'll be the last thing. I think there's going to be something crazy chucked up, isn't there, when, you know, technology develops again? Like, I don't know.
Would you think somebody VR, like augmented reality in your living room, standing just speaking to you, blind boy just sitting speaking to me in that pub?
That's it. Maybe you'll even get like VR, like people coming back for the dead, and you can do podcasts with them.
Oh, now you're talking, mate.
That's still podcast though.
Was Michael Jackson though doing gigs for like Beyond the Grave?
Like a hologram.
Maybe we could get him on this podcast.
I know a few lawyers. I've got a few questions for him. That is a good question though, because it seems to be that, where do you go? But I suppose everybody stopped, probably said that, you know, when radio came out. You can't do anything else after that, you know. So
it's funny that radio and podcasts are very similar in a lot of ways. It's almost like that original ideas it stood the test of time. Just people having a conversation. It's kind of, that's how it started, and that's how it's evolving still. Like, even though there is all these changes in technology and different stuff, it's still in a lot of ways getting back to just people, speaking to people, communicating.
That's a great point, because I feel that, and this is me being unfair, because I think the younger generations have got so much to give, and they probably know a lot more about technology and advances than we do. But I think with the younger generation, a lot of the time, they don't. Just looking at my wee cousins, for example, and their friends or people that you see in the local area, and they don't seem to have that level of conversation as much. Everybody's stuck on their phones and they're texting, or they're sending voice notes rather than actually sitting in the park and having a conversation with their pals. So I wonder, what is the next advance coming through that? I can't see them having podcasts, but they might have something else out there that is totally different to that.
It is an interesting point you make, Derek, about I never really thought about it until you mentioned it, but it is so true. There is, other forms aren't coming out as much as podcasts now. There's nothing really that I can see that's rival on it in terms of output. Maybe apart from just people putting up selfies or that sort of stuff. But in terms of an organised thing that people tune into, it's definitely on the up. I mean, especially,
if you take Instagram, for example, see if you went back 10 years ago or 15 years, would we ever have thought influencers were going to be a thing? Do you know what I mean? People posting what makeup they're wearing today, and then everybody goes and buys it. It's madness. So to try and predict what the next form of anything is going to be, it's well over my head.
That's very true. I was watching Jonathan Ross. This is going to show my age really badly here, right? But I was sitting down the stairs, and Saturday night Jonathan Ross shows on in it, and they had an American rapper lassie that was on Zoom doing a talk. I don't know what her name is or anything like that, but they just, after he was talking to some of the guests, it was Mickey Flanagan and that, they would cut away to this Zoom and say, we're going to speak to whatever her name is in a wee while. And see, the first time it cut away for her, I genuinely thought it was a Japanese cartoon. See the way she was up, and my wife's like, that's what other lassies look like. And I was like, I thought she was a cartoon. She actually looked like a cartoon, but it was a real person. Mental.
I'm telling you, Swanee, we're just out of touch.
So
we're getting old.
So old, man. They don't look like that in the tavern, Derek. That's what I'm saying, mate. That's what I'm saying.
That's probably a good thing.
Absolutely, mate. Absolutely. I'm just going to digress every now and again, but see, Amanda Knox, how the fuck did you pull that one off?
It's a strange one, right? Because I was watching...
Hold on a second, Derek. Spanko, you've got the most horrible palm I've ever seen in my life, mate. Look at that wrinkly palm. Look how wrinkly that is. That's horrible, isn't it, lads? Such a horrible fat palm. Sorry, mate, I cut you off there.
It's alright.
I don't know what he's doing.
I don't know how much you know about Amanda Knox's story, but...
I've seen the Netflix thing and stuff, yeah.
Well, that was it for me. I remember it at the time, when it was all this Foxy Knoxy stuff, and there's been a murder in Italy, and there's an American student that's been arrested for it, etc. But I don't think I followed it too closely at the time. And then last year I watched the documentary on Netflix, and I watched it with Natalie, my fiancée, and I said, we were having a heated debate about whether she was guilty or not. And I was saying, she's definitely done that. She's 100% guilty. And Natalie's saying, no chance. She's been stitched up by the media. They've portrayed her in this light. And the two years we were in total polar opposites of the spectrum. And I said, do you know what? I'm going to get her on the podcast, and I'm going to actually ask her and see what I think for speaking to her, because I think you get a better idea when you actually speak to somebody personally. And Natalie's like, aye, very good. You'll never get her on your podcast. So the first thing I done is I just googled Amanda Knox, and it turns out that she has her own podcast.
Right, okay.
And she does a true crime podcast.
Jesus Christ.
Aye, so basically her and I believe it's her husband have set this kind of media type company up. So she's wrote a few books about her story and what you'd usually do in these situations, I suppose, if you get people telling you to sell your story. But she gets people on and she tries to talk about people who've been wrongly convicted or who've been screwed by the system. So I just went on her website and dropped her an email and says, listen, I'll be perfectly honest with you, I've watched your thing on Netflix and I'd just love to speak to you about your story. And I thought, I'm never going to hear back from her. So about a month later I get an email back saying, thanks very much for your inquiry, I don't speak to British journalists, something along those lines. So I just says, really appreciate you coming back. one, I'm no British, and two, I'm not a journalist. I says, I'm just a wee Scottish guy that's doing a podcast, you know, independent, you know, it's not as if I'm trying to get any information out you here. I says, we'll have a genuine chat, and if there's anything you don't want to talk about, fair enough. And she says, I appreciate your honesty. She said, send me some of your previous episodes and I'll check it out. So I sent her one with Mary Black and our local MP as well, Marion Fellows.
Amazing.
Yeah.
And I sent her one with the band Father Son, Ross Layton for Father Son.
Yeah, nice.
And she came back and she says, they seem like really, you know, level-headed chats, quite relaxed. And I says, that's all I'm looking to do. And then she agreed to it, and we done it over Zoom, similar to this, and I totally changed my mind on it. I came away thinking that she didn't do it.
Really?
What is the story? Sorry, I don't know. I'm not best.
So she spent 4 years in an Italian prison, Merv, and they think that it was her pal, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Her pal, is it Kercher or something like
Meredith Kercher. So
That's
she had a boyfriend that she'd been going out with for a few weeks, who was Italian. She moved from America to Italy to study out there. And while she was out on a night out, she came back from a night out and found her flatmate murdered in her flat. Really horrific crime scene, you know, blood everywhere. It
was rural Italy as well, wasn't it?
It was
like
Perugia.
Really rural.
Aye, really rural, lovely wee town and stuff. So apparently nothing like this ever happens in that town. So it ended up being international news. They eventually pinned it on a black guy who was living in the area, who had a previous conviction or a string of previous convictions. There was a bit of his DNA at the crime scene, but not a lot, and there wasn't really any Amanda Knox's, but the media painted it in a light that, you know, she was very kinky, and they were calling her Foxy Knoxy, and it was sex games gone wrong, and they were saying that they thought that the flatmate was involved in a potential threesome with her and her boyfriend and blah blah blah, and this went on for ages. And I think because she was young and pretty and American, and this thing doesn't really happen over there, it was an international story, you know, that I think the media did see we could spin this in a really interesting light. I'll be honest though, and I'd say this to her if she was listening, or if she had to ask me, but I think she knows more about it than she lets on.
That's what I was going to say. The only thing that I took away, I never really came away from it going, right, she's guilty or she's innocent. I came away from it going, there's more to that than even some of the clips right after when the body was found on the documentary of her just isn't somebody that I would imagine, but you don't know how anybody would react in that circumstance or how you would react in that circumstance, but she didn't seem to be portraying anything that would be normal for somebody in that situation. I know it's not normal at all, but you know, a wee bit of shock or a wee bit of, it just seemed as if she was like, there's more to this than met the eye. I must admit the evidence against the guy was very thin, but I did still think, well, what was his DNA doing there in the first place? You know, if DNA is a big marker for it, why is it there? He must have been there at some point. So it's a hard one.
You hit the nail on the head. There was after the documentary shows it very clear, you know, after she returns to the crime scene, you know, the police are in searching the flat and doing all the usual stuff where they're checking for DNA, they're checking for evidence, and there's photos of her and our videos of her and her boyfriend at the time just standing outside the flat, you know, like kissing each other and snogging.
It was weird.
They're not showing any emotion at all. So I asked her on the podcast, I says, you know, like, that's not what people would perceive as normal behaviour. And she says, this is my first time away from home. What is
She's 20.
She's 20. What is normal behaviour in that? You know, she's like, my flatmate's been murdered. I don't know MD here apart from this boyfriend of mine, you know, I'm in a foreign country.
Yeah.
And at that point she wasn't being classed as a suspect, so it's a really complex case, and
it is.
We could talk about it all day, but I definitely recommend watching that Netflix documentary.
That's
and listening to the podcast as well.
What's it called?
I'm sure it's just Knox or something.
It's like Amanda Knox or something like that. If you search
you're not going to
online,
struggle to find it. It'll be there. It's the only one on Netflix I think about her. But it's good. It's interesting to hear that she's starting up, you know, true crime stuff and that.
She does something on, I don't know if it's CNN or one of these American
Facebook
channels
Watch
as well.
Or something like that as well. There was something about she got a contract with Facebook Watch to do something along those lines. It was one of the first ones when Rogan got his Spotify contract. I heard a wee bit about that. I don't know enough about it to comment on it, but
it's interesting because she still really divides opinion. You know, like there was a few people. My mom was raging when I said I was getting her on the podcast. My mom was furious, right? So Mum's like, oh, you get MD coming up on your podcast? And I usually say, I've got this band from Glasgow or whatever. And I says, I've got Amanda Knox. And she goes, that murderer! And that poor black boy's in jail cause of it. And I was like, oh, for fuck's sake. If that's my boss saying that, what's other people going to think? But, you know, actually after it, she says, no, listen, you painted yourself in a good light and you didn't take any sides and blah, blah, blah. And she's like, it was actually interesting. But she was like, my mum's reads all these crap news articles and whatever else, so she was very much like, oh,
just
she's
a typical
guilty.
Lanarkshire mother then.
Aye, she had her guilty for the start.
Aye, the mud sticks. I've listened to the first wee bit of it. I'll need to listen to it all because I'm quite interested in it. It's a mental story, as you say. Crazy. You can talk about it all day. Definitely.
So did she get charged, but it wasn't? She never done it. Is that the?
Aye.
It's an unknown. It's an unknown. Is that the?
Her and the boyfriend get 4. I think they eventually done 7 years in total or so, but it was initial 4 years, and then they kept appealing, and eventually they appealed 3 times, and they got out. And then even when they were back home, or she was back home in America, the case was ongoing to try and get them back inside, and now it's been totally quashed and they've been all charges dropped. So
did she get a payout for it or anything like that? Do you know?
I don't know.
Compen?
I'm not sure. I don't think so, but I'm not 100%.
That's the first thing I'd have been asking her, Derek. Did you get weighed in, Amanda? Did you get weighed in?
Well, that's it. She's had her book deal and whatever else, you know, and she's still, regardless of whether what she's done or what she hasn't done, she's still making money off the back of what happened, you know, like, which
is a tragedy. At the end of the day, somebody lost their life, didn't they? Aye, absolutely. Anko's question.
Oh, right, okay. It's probably the boring question.
Can we ask why did we get the fat palm interruption?
Oh, Laura was coming in the door. That's the front door of the flat. So I forgot that you can turn the video off. Like an idiot. It's the beer. It's a dead boring question, but what's your production process? So you can tell me right from the start. I don't know who's going to do that. See, what do you do right from the start? How do you get your guests on? Do you send them a form like us, or what? Prepare a load of questions. You do a lot of prep, and then what do you do post record? Or how do you record it, and then what do you do after that?
I'll be honest, Mark. Unlike you guys, I'm a bit of a cheat with this because Aaron Smith, that plays in the Banter Thiefs with us, guitarist, he done sound production at uni in college, and he basically does most of it for me. So where possible, I like to record face to face. Obviously in current circumstances that's not really been the case, or if you're dealing with a guest from abroad you can't do that. So he basically comes along and sets up the microphone, sets everything up and takes it away and edits it afterwards. So I'm very much lucky in that respect, that we work together on it. And I mean, for me, you know, I'm useless with stuff like that, so it's brilliant to have somebody that's expert in that field.
We're completely the opposite. We've got a guy in our band that went to uni and studied sound engineering, and we do it all.
Oh, aye, right. Fucking fuck off.
That sounds like a touchy subject, that, by the way. I don't want to start any internal wars here.
Oh, listen, they don't need any help starting that, mate, let me tell you.
So I'm unfair if I had to say that I'm producing everything myself, but no, Aaron's a great help and really, really appreciate it, so it's good.
Nice one. You could have came on online and just went, I spend days and days.
To be honest, I mean, I tend not to cut too much, or Aaron tends not to cut too much. You know, he'll deal with the levels and you know, if there's any feedback or you know if there's any issues with connectivity or whatever. But on the whole, we try to keep it as running smoothly as possible.
Aye, absolutely.
Is your conversation kind of basically just recorded as is?
Absolutely, aye.
Straight in, and there's not a lot of editing
not at all. The only thing we chuck in really is an intro and an outro, if that, you know, and any adverts if there was any, you know, but that's it.
That's podcasting, mate, but innit? That's what it's meant to be.
Aye.
I've got a shiter question, by the way. I've got the ultimate shite question. It was me that chose this one, but this is like asking a band, what's your favourite album? What's your best guest, mate? What's your best guest?
Do you know what? I'm now on, what am I up to now? I think we're on 54 or 55 episodes that we've put out. And
55? It's fucking hell.
It's really hard to choose. It really, really is, because there's so many people that are great in their own ways, and I think I come away from every podcast thinking, that's definitely my best one. And then if you ever listen back to older ones, which I don't do a lot, but if I watch wee clips or anything, I think, God, that last one wasn't my best one. You know, you're forgetting because some are so far in the past now. in terms of this year, it was obviously great to have Amanda Knox on because it got a lot of attention for the podcast. You know, it was in most of the papers here in Scotland, and off the back of that, I noticed my listening figures going up on other episodes as well. It was people that were maybe not listening to the podcast at first, then took an interest in it, and thankfully a lot of the people have stayed. For me, getting to speak to musicians, you know, that I really respect is always really, really good as well. So I had Stuart Braitwaithe on for Mogwai. See your wee poster behind you there, Swanee, with the Mogwai mention on it as well.
Yes, that's actually art done by John McClendon, Martin's brother, for the band The Memes. John done that years ago, and I bought that up in Dundee, that gig that we always talk about. It was that gig that I bought the 2 bits of art off him.
Brilliant.
He was selling his art up there, wasn't he? I think it was that one anyway, but that's John McClendon's art. Talking Heads, Mogwai, Teenage Fan Club, and it's you can't really see it for there, but it's like all different wee bits of paper, like articles. So if you look up close, it's all different articles, and I must admit, sometimes I find myself reading some of them.
That's class.
Just to see what he got in that, but he's done a great job in that one, hasn't he?
So you know, it was great to have Stuart from Mogwai on. Jarrett for Bowling for Soup that you mentioned earlier was really good as well. Had Barry for the Fratellis, people like that, you know, the bands that you listen to yourself that you just enjoy. It's good to chat to him.
Barry's was good. I felt as if you got him really relaxed, or maybe he's just that type of guy, but he just seemed to be just right, I'll just tell you everything. When he was talking about Jules Holland, I was like, well, that just sounds like a wee guy for down the road. And is it just a wee guy for down the road? But he's just talking about, you know, they were like the main act on Jules at that point and stuff like that, and it's just like, wow,
absolutely,
it's amazing.
It's really inspiring to hear these people's stories, and especially bands like that, you know, that are from the same area as us, that have went on to, you know, play these massive festivals or play with their heroes, you know.
Absolutely.
It almost gives inspiration to people like us, or you know, the younger generations that are coming through. The thing that I hate about my podcast is if you're trying to get people to listen to it and they don't know who the guest is, then they probably won't. And I'm guilty of that as well. Like, for example, if you look at somebody's podcast, the first thing you'll do is you'll look through their guests and think, oh, I know who they are, I'll listen to that one. But for me, on my podcast, I think some of the best ones have been people that are local or don't have as high a profile. So I done one with Graham Armstrong, which has been really popular actually. Graham's a Scottish author from Airdrie, and he wrote a book called The Young Team. Brought it out this year. It was his debut novel. It's brilliant. If you're from about here and you grew up in Lanarkshire, it's basically set in Lanarkshire, so there's so many local references that it's unreal, and it's essentially his story, but it's not about himself, it's reflective. It's, you know, the main character's called Azzy Williams, but it's kind of through the eyes of him growing up and how he got involved with gangs and violence and drug addiction. And it's quite reflective looking back and saying, you know, at the time I thought this was the be all and end all. In hindsight, I had a great time, but you know, it was quite bad for my mental health. It was quite bad for my progression as a person. And it also has this underlying theme, you know what, there's actually a bigger world out there that we should take advantage of. And Graham's story's fantastic. You know, Graham was involved with gangs and young teams or whatever in Lanarkshire and Airdrie. He got really, really bad drug addiction later in life, and then he went back to Stirling Uni, studied a master's, and has brought out a book. You know, he's really, really turned his life around, and to hear his story first hand for me it had quite a knock-on effect on me. I came away thinking, you know, what a great guy, that means quite a lot, it's inspiring. So for me, that's one of my favourite ones that I've done, and we still keep in touch, you know, text every few days and all that, and we've really hit it off the back of it. So
that's brilliant.
What was the guy's name, sorry?
Graham Armstrong.
I need to check that book out. That's something I'd be right into.
It's brilliant. You know, he talks about going down the Strathie, and when they used to have the cruises for the cars there, folk used to go down on a Sunday or whatever with their souped up cars, and he makes reference to like dance events like Fantasia and all that, and listening to the Happy Hardcore and
Fantasia.
It's funny because there's things there that I've never seen referenced in text before, you know, in a published book. And it's been put
unless
out
it's something Welsh or something like that.
You know, and it is almost like he writes it in Lanarkshire dialect as well, so if you weren't about here, I can imagine you'd pick it up almost similar to Irvine Welsh and think, I can't really understand that at first. But once you start getting that flow and you're a few pages in, you're like, this is class. It's absolutely brilliant.
Aye, I'd be right into that. I need to check that out. Have you took a note of that, Spanks, for me later on?
Yes, I've got a note.
Spanks is like Jamie and I'm like Joe Rogan. So Spanks just takes on my notes.
Fingers.
And I've also just noticed as well, Derek's got a lovely Christmas tree and a nice sweet in the background. Neil's in his usual podcast thing. Mer's flats look nice and clean. Spanker's got all the bar stuff and the palm trees, and I've got the bag for life. Sitting on top of fucking a bunch of coats.
You can't
That's Lanarkshire for you, mate. That's Lanarkshire.
Can I touch it now for continuity, mate?
I know, that's it. I'll just need to stay there.
At least you're recycling. I don't use bag for life. I need to start. I'm guilty of buying fucking plastic bags every time I go.
You can't be a vegan and buy plastic bags, mate. That's fucking rang, mate.
I know.
That's just back to front. That's like being a vegan with his own jumbo jet.
Aye, I wish.
That's all it is.
Would you rather
Can dance to your jingles now?
basketball? Would you rather have tea for a house to call your own? Let's have a game, or would you rather? Would you rather?
That makes absolutely no sense.
Okay, would you rather watch a podcast or listen to a podcast?
Can't watch a podcast, mate. Next question.
Okay, I never wrote the question. So,
You would watch a vodcast, would you
a
not?
podcast, well, aye, that's what it is. Oh, that's so pedantic.
Get
Get
the
it
lingo
right,
right.
Spanks. Get
Get
it
the
right,
lingo right,
fuck's
man.
sake.
Would you rather watch a podcast?
I've never heard that term, vodcast.
Have you not?
I thought that's like doing a podcast drinking vodka or something.
Vodka, I know.
Aye. That's probably been done as well, I would imagine. I would rather watch one.
Wait, do you?
Aye. I mean, no, I don't know.
I listen to them when I'm doing a task of some sort, like I'm driving or I'm cleaning or something like that. Like I'll have a podcast on just to have some sort of entertainment while I'm doing some sort of boring task.
Driving's my podcast thing, so I couldn't really watch one when I'm driving, or I would hit a few poles
Exactly.
and walls. So I definitely think I'll go podcast. I'll go listen to
for
podcast.
me, aye.
What about you, Derek?
I'd
Do
go
you watch
listen as
many?
well. I tend to listen when I'm driving somewhere, or if I'm driving to work, or if I'm on the train or something like that. And I've actually wondered this year if, because there's less people commuting, if less people will be listening to podcasts, or if because they're at home, more people will be listening to them, because I've got a bit more time. I'm not really sure, but I definitely think it's a different audience that watches to a different audience that listens.
Aye, different people.
Aye. Aye.
What about you,
think,
Neil? Do you listen to any?
I would definitely listen more than watch, because I can't remember the last time I sat and watched TV. You know what I mean? I don't really sit and watch TV at all. It has to be it's usually in the background. Netflix is usually on, or YouTube or something. There's always background, but I'm listening to it more than I'm watching it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, definitely. I've noticed as well when I'm working from home that we put on Classic FM through the Sonos for the dogs during the day, so they kind of keep settled. And I've noticed that even when I finish, it's maybe about 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock at night before we switch the tell on, that Classic FM is just playing. You just get into a mode, and and it just kind of stays there all the time. But I listen to a few podcasts during the day. I think it's a valid point as well with the home working. Are more people listening to it while they're in the office? I find I don't get time. Skype's going, Microsoft Teams meetings are going, so I don't really get time to listen to them. So I wouldn't want to put a podcast on. I would rather just have, mundane Christmas music playing through Classic FM, and I know I'm not missing any what I want to get later, kind of thing. But I wonder if there is more people took it up that wouldn't.
I think if it's just sheer background noise, I think music's probably better for it, because even though a podcast you can zone in and zone out, you kind of still need a wee bit of concentration to pick up what's getting said, whereas music, I think, it can just be sheer white noise, or it can be whatever, you can get right in it just the same. But I think for me, walking about with a dog and that through lockdown, to be honest, I never really, I wasn't even listening to podcasts until lockdown. I used to listen to them maybe like a good few years back, like the Ricky Gervais and stuff like that. And then I thought, to me, I don't know whether it just petered out me listening to them, but definitely through us starting this is what got me into it. It's that Adam Buxton one's the one I listen to constantly, and it's That's the only one I've only really get time for one a day, but I sometimes listen to another couple. But walking the dog, so that's maybe something that's been like I would have been commuting before, whereas because I'm I'm doing that instead. So rather than just walking in silence, maybe using that as an opportunity. But definitely it's good to do it doing a task, and I think video actually takes something away from it almost, because I think you can home in more and everything is so visual these days. I think it's quite good to tune out of that and just tune into the audio a wee bit more. I don't really watch any at all, but I listen to.
I agree with that. I think something that's more visual is you end up being led more, because all your senses are being sort of focused onto whatever is being shown and heard. But when you're just either reading a book or hearing a book, for example, or a conversation, you got a lot more imagination you can use. So it's less about
it feeds your imagination.
Yeah, exactly. It's good to be so.
Yeah, definitely. I don't know if it's just that I've listened to all my most favourite podcast episodes when I've been driving, but I just associate driving with it so much. I mean, you know how you've got the automations on the iPhone now, so when I get in the car, that's what just starts, you know, and it's just a thing for me now. So I wonder if it's just been my favourite podcast that I've been really into episode wise has been when I've been driving, because I do listen to my other points, like you say, Merv, out walking the dog podcast again kind of thing. In fact, I don't really listen to music that much anymore. The more I think about it, you know, so it's mostly podcast for me, I would say.
Definitely this year I've been listening to podcasts way more than music, which is that was whenever I was doing these things, it was always music. Now it's been kind of replaced with podcasts, because the thing is there's that many to get through. Because I'm trying to get through that Adam Buxton one. I'm listening to another couple. I'm listening to the La Fontaine's one now and again, and yeah, but I like Barry's one. I can, and I'm starting to listen to some episodes of yours as well, Derek. But I kind of like the sort of independent, new sort of Scottish ones more than. I'm more drawn to that than what I would be to go for like a big name, podcast. I think there is something good about hearing people from similar to yourself doing it, rather than like some American. Aye.
I'll say it,
I agree with you, Merv. I actually think that the majority of podcasts that I listen to are by Scottish people. Or the one that I'm a big fan of, I don't know if any of you have heard, it's called Drunk Therapy, and it's almost similar to you guys. It's four mates just talking crap over a few beers, and sometimes they'll get guests on, sometimes they won't, but they're really, really good. One of the guys is a Kiwi living in Glasgow, and the other ones are just three boys from Glasgow, and they're brilliant. They're really, really good, and it's just independent as well. And I think it's good as well, because these people are giving platforms to people that might not necessarily get a platform, be that up and coming bands or artists or people in the arts doing something a wee bit different.
I like the Irish ones. I listen to a lot of Irish ones, and that's don't be stereotyping me, the typical Celtic supporter, but it's something about the Irish accent in a podcast when you're listening to it. I like the Colin Geddes one's brilliant, I think, just to listen to as well, because he's got that dead thick Belfast accent. So my cousin from Arizona, who listens to this one, she actually said that a lot of people, there's bits of like what, but they'll listen to it because
they don't say what.
I love his accent, man.
What did he
say? What the fuck did that boy just say there? God damn it!
That's probably the only bit I understand. Is that? That's how we need to speak to Siri and Alexa. Like, if they don't understand me, I'll just put an American accent.
Aye, I do that, no. Do you ever do it when there's people about, though?
Aye, I don't care. Aye.
Do you?
Aye. Well, you know what I'm like?
Do you know what happened to me last night with my Alexa? How weird is this, right? Have you ever had messages through your Alexa? You ever had a message through your Alexa?
From another person?
Aye, so it's got a drop-in facility, so I can say to my Alexa now, drop in Matthew Swan, my brother, and it'll literally just, it doesn't even ring.
It's so dodgy, that, isn't it? It's so
it just
dodgy, man.
Pops up, I can hear him and he'll hear me.
That's
but
weird.
You can also, sorry, Doug's are going daft, but you can also, I'll say, send Matthew an audio message. Doug's are going berserk. And your Alexa lights up orange, and that says you've got a message. You say play message, and it'll play the message. So mine's lit up orange last night, and I'm like, Alexa, play message, and it was a message for the very start of lockdown, like the 2 days before lockdown or something. Like somebody had sent me a message, and I'd never got it. It was like March.
Fucking hell.
And that was him just sending me a message for March. How mental is that?
Fucking hell. Must have
I've never bought into the whole Alexa thing. I've been like,
it's dodgy,
I'm not wanting the government listening to me as I'm walking about on my iPhone.
That's it.
Not the brightest.
It's the same as the anti-vaxxers are saying they're not putting that muck into my body while they're stuffing a Rustler's burger down their neck. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
So I seen that Begbie scene on Facebook. I was pissing myself at that, where, you know, when Begbie's talking about the heroin.
Aye.
Never get me putting that shite chemicals in me, smoking a fag, fucking thing of whiskey. I quite like that. It sums it up, doesn't it? It really sums it up.
Exactly.
Love it.
Oh, shit.
That's the longest out intro of a tune ever. You know how this works, Derek, don't you? We'll list some people and you'll tell us if they're a banger or a saint, and no matter what you say, that's the truth and that's the fact of the matter, and everybody in the whole wide world has to live by it. Adam Curry and Dave Winner. Is it Winner or Winer?
Who is this? Is that the...
And do you know who they are?
No.
Well, this is a confession I had. I actually had to Google him when you sent this over.
Surprised at that, mate?
I actually was mortified once I seen who they were.
So they're credited with being the inventors of podcasts. They were like, it's meant to be the first guys that had done the podcast. But it was a bit obnoxious of me putting that in there, because I literally didn't know who the fuck they were either.
Is that you to put that in there?
I googled who was the first podcast, and it came up with them, and I says, I'm going to stick it in, I'll look really clever and that. And then now I've came to the point where I've got fuck all to say about these guys because I don't know who they are, and it's going to look really shite.
That's amazing. I'm so glad you said that, because I was thinking, oh my god, I'm a moron. I do a podcast and I didn't know who the first ones to do it was.
You're in the lucky situation where there's definitely 4 more moronic guys round about you this evening, mate. So, aye. Well, apparently they were the 2 guys that started podcasts, so for me, they're a saint. That's all I know about them. That's all I know.
Let's talk them up and see if there's any interesting facts.
There isn't. I tried all that, I know that.
The first one I ever listened to was the Ricky Gervais one, probably in about 2004.
That was my first one.
That was my first one.
I still watch them, do you know that? I still watch
the cartoon version of it.
I still go back and watch
them. This is years before the cartoon as well. But
you talking about the actual podcast ones? I wasn't learning back then, nah.
Aye, 2003, 4, something like that. That was the very first one I can remember.
How did you hear about that? Because I never heard about that back then.
How did podcast? You hear about it? I don't know.
About that one in particular? Did somebody put you onto that?
I don't know, but see, I remember loving it. I remember thinking, this is amazing. Yeah.
I love the video ones.
You definitely put me onto that, Spanks, at the time. The Ricky Gervais one.
That's the very first one I remember, and then I think I left it for years, didn't listen to anything until 5 or 6 years ago.
Louis Theroux as well. I listened to a lot of his stuff. It was podcasting.
His podcast is great, yeah.
Brilliant, isn't he? He's just got a new one with BBC Sounds or something as well.
Yeah, that's the one I've been listening to this year. He's actually only done 2 episodes of Series 2, but I've not listened to any of them, but I've listened to the whole Series 1, and he's just so good at that, isn't he?
Mm-hmm.
I wish I had that. I wish
he's so direct.
Aye, but he does it so warm, Merv. He does it dead comfy, and like, look at me, I'm the silly kind of a presenter guy, but he really gets to the heart of the matter. I love that.
And there's people like, I was watching that Scientology program he done the other night, and there's a guy that's getting the guy that's his pal in it. I don't know his pal. The guy that's the main person he's interviewing throughout it, that used to be in Scientology and stuff. He's sitting with him every day, but the guy, and he's quite aggressive. The guy all the time, and he's getting quite aggressive with Louis at a lot of points, because he's saying, he's asking the same question. You can see he's physically getting angry with him, but Louis just always does it. He says stuff. I can't remember the thing he said, but it was something quite cheeky. But the way he said it was just totally like the guy that diffused the situation completely. He has definitely got a skill for getting the best out of people and probing and just making it seem like as if it's
seamless.
That's a skill. That's a skill. Know what I mean?
I was watching his thing. Did any of you watch the thing where he done recently, where it was like him commentating on all his past like episodes?
I watched that.
combining it all into like one. He was saying, this is what I done, and he was speaking to the guys maybe 20 years later, you know, the people that were in the podcast. But the one that I found real interesting that I watched it back again was when he went to see the Nazis, and he was in the garage. They were all having a drink, and it cuts to maybe about they must have been there for a couple of hours, and everything's alright at the start and all that, but then they go, but are you a Jew? And he's like, I'd rather not answer that. And like, well, we'd rather you did answer it. It starts to get a bit, and you can see Louis. That's the first time I've ever seen Louis going, I need to get the fuck out of here, man. You know, because he's like, and he says, and we just left after that. But you can see that he gets himself into some. You need to have balls, is what I'm trying to say, to do what he does, because he's looking these people straight in the fucking eye, and he's saying, I'm in your house and I'm asking you these fucking questions about you know, being a racist, and I'm challenging most of these things while I'm doing it, but I'll respect you at the same time. But obviously, you know, he brought up the Jewish thing at the start, and you could see their mind, by beer after beer, you could see their minds ticking over going, is he? And if I let him in, and then see when it happened, oh my god, I've never seen his face like that before, because he was in with rednecks, skinheads in a garage in the middle of nowhere with two fat camera guys for Britain, so they were getting it. If it was, you know, if it was going to go down, they would have really get in a bad situation. But takes massive balls, I would say, to do that.
Definitely. Because they've got guns in that, those people, and it's like
hundreds of them.
And as you say, it's just him and a camera. Like, I don't imagine it's the way TV used to be with big production crews and
no, it's just a guy and a sound guy. I think
it's just a guy with a camera and him just getting right in there. You know what I mean? So definitely fair play to him.
You know, in that episode, the mother that's got the two twins, there's two wee twins, two blonde twins. I don't know if any of you have seen them, and she's got them like dancing around swastikas, and they sing in a band at all the kind of a right wing events. Shit. But the good thing about it is this programme went back. So this one that he done this year went back, and the two daughters have like completely disowned the racist mother. They're in her 20s now, and they'd completely turned their life around. And when they watch it back, it's like sickening to them and all that. So it's good to actually see that side of it, you know, it's interesting to see him speaking to, you know, this family set up, and then 20 years later actually going, well, how is things now? So it was quite good to watch. Check it
he's
out
a saint. Voice, it is a saint, definitely.
He's 100% a saint.
Definitely.
It's one of the biggest out there, I would say, the saint wise.
Brilliant. I don't know anyone that doesn't like Louis Theroux or said a bad word about him ever, I don't think.
Mary Ann doesn't like watching him because
it's very heavy.
It's more to do with she can't watch The Office. See the cringe factor stuff.
I know what you mean. Yeah,
you know what I mean.
Cringy,
see when he asks that question and you're like,
it's awkward as fuck, guys. It's so awkward.
Oh, you doing, Louis? I mean, I like that. She hates that. So I think it's either your bag or it's not your bag, I suppose. Like anything else. Moving on from my shitey banger I've sent, because nobody can really comment on it because nobody knows who the fuck. I bet you nailed this. I bet you nailed this.
No, not really. Actually, no. I know more about him now than what you have said. So I'll just go Saint.
Neil, what's that next to you? Is that one of the Dyson fans?
Oh yeah.
Is it?
Yeah.
Nice.
You can't hide money.
Can't hide fucking dosh, eh?
Jesus Christ.
No, that's
your
not
hair's getting long as well, boy.
Mine?
Aye.
That is
getting long, isn't it? Aye. The Muay ponytail.
Actually, my daughter put me off when I was shaving my head the other day, and I took a chunk at the back of my head, so my wife had to shave it even up further. So it's more like Japanese top knot now than it was Viking warrior. Unfortunately,
I like it. Next one, then I'll just go to the next one, will I, boys? Right. Aye. So standard 2 coming up. Who chose this one? Joe Rogan. I'm going to go Saint. He's a banger, but I'm going to go Saint because he's a banger in some of his views. Some of his views are completely fucking ridiculous, and guns and all that kind of stuff. He's definitely got like a misogynistic streak to him, I would say, a wee bit as well. But he's a saint in the podcasting world, isn't he?
Do you think his views change depending on what guests on?
Yes,
I think 100%.
So I think so. Fickle that way.
I think everybody's a wee bit like that, but in there, you're not. If you brought somebody on that was, you know, this way inclined, you wouldn't go completely the other way, would you? But I know what you mean with that. He contradicts himself sometimes. But see, when you've done 1,755 episodes of a podcast, then you're going to trip yourself up every now and again, aren't you? Do you know what I mean?
He's definitely a king of communication, man. He runs the podcast. I know that they're probably some of them are long as fuck, right?
I love them ones.
But you're still intrigued by it, and he really knows how to ask folk questions and stuff. Do you know what I mean? But some of his views are fucking stinking. Some of the folk he gets on, I disagree with as well. But I think that's his thing, innit? That's like,
he does that.
Listen to these fucking cunts.
He actually says that. What is the point of me? You know, if I've got this audience, what is the point of me sitting with people I just agree with? And stuff like
that's true. Yeah,
absolutely true. I would say. What do you think, Derek?
I'm in two minds. Like, as you says, podcast world, you've got to say Saint. You know, he's the biggest one in the world. He's got that Spotify exclusive. You know, but it's 30 million or something.
It's $100 million. $100 million.
Crazy,
nuts, man.
But then I think his views are madness. You know, he's a total transphobe. You know, I heard him talking about, you know, one of these women athletes who was previously a man, and he just kept going on about she's just a fucking man, why is she like trying to compete with women? And then there was another one where he had that guy, I forget the boy's name, he's like the leader of the Proud Boys out in America.
I know you're talking about.
He had him on as well, and he just gave him, in my opinion, you know, he just gave him this space to vent about Muslims, and I thought, what are you doing? Like, he wasn't really holding them to account, and
it's a bit soft, isn't it? Sometimes, like, leaving that. Yeah, definitely.
But on the other hand, you know, he's had people like Bernie Sanders on, and he's come out and said, I'd vote for Bernie Sanders, you know, if that was the option. And you're thinking, you're changing like the wind.
I know. He really does.
It comes across sometimes as, I'm this redneck hunter, meat eater, gatherer who's, you know, like you say, a bit homophobic, a bit transphobic. I wouldn't say homophobic, but like you say, he's got that element of a man's a man, a woman's a woman, and all that kind of stuff, you know. But he's a hard one to peg, because sometimes I listen to him and I go, I really respect that guy. He seems really intelligent, and some of the stuff that he's got loads of world experience. There's no doubt about that. But like you say, some of his views make my West of Scotland socialist toes curl. What do you think about
his fucking mad brain drugs, brain food shit that he sells?
He does microdosing and stuff like that.
But he sells, like, he's got a company that sells like legal brain food.
Ego brains.
Legal brain food. So it's stuff, it's pills that you take that's supplements for your, apparently, for your focus and stuff.
It gets your testosterone going and stuff.
He's definitely a bit fried, eh?
I
listened to his podcast with Tony Hawk, and I thought, this would be classy. We're talking about skateboarding and his computer game and whatever else, and he just spent about an hour trying to ask Tony Hawk why he doesn't take supplements.
I know.
You know, and Tony Hawk saying, I'm 50, man, like, I've never done
skateboarder.
And he's like, honestly, it'd be better for your movement. And he's like, fucking
He
shut up.
says it to everybody, Derek. He says it to musicians. He goes, just you think, if you sharpen up your senses with these supplements, you could play that solo so much
he owns
faster.
A company that fucking sells them.
Fuck you, about Joe. You know what I mean? He's
So,
pumped full of stuff, but that guy, I mean, do you know what he actually said on one of the, you know how he kills elk? He kills elk, right, and freezes them in these big freezers. But he eats their liver and their heart raw.
Oh, fucking hell, man.
He eats their liver.
Probably that's actually
He says, like, the protein, the iron count is, like, through the roof and all that, so he eats them.
So you definitely get tribes and stuff that drink blood.
Well, that's where he got it from, Murph. That's
where he like meat and stuff.
In that respect, I think, what a banger.
But
you know, when we're sitting here doing podcasts, and that's the top of the tree, you can't really be slating him too much, can you?
No.
He's got to be doing something.
I had Dave Chappelle on recently, but it was only like a little half, maybe 40 minutes, because he's been trying to get him on for years. And man, that guy is like, can talk so well, man. Like, I'm a big fan of Dave Chappelle. No, I don't agree with all his views either, but see, just listening to Dave Chappelle talk, man, you're just like, this guy's a fucking genius. Absolute genius.
Is he not a mad Republican, that guy?
Dave Chappelle? No, definitely not.
No. He's the one that done the speech about the Black Lives Matters recently, wasn't it? It was like the first comedy gig after lockdown.
So it was only like a 20-minute gig.
I'm thinking of somebody else.
Yeah.
I know who you mean. I'm thinking.
It wasn't very funny though. It wasn't funny.
Kanye's a big Republican, isn't he? Kanye West.
Kanye West probably is.
He had him on. He was actually alright. He's fried and all, but
he's
mad. He's got his own church or something. His own following.
Church of Kanye, probably.
Church of to worship him.
Fucking banger. Absolute banger. Didn't last a minute in Bells Hill, that cunt.
Get him on your next stream for the Celtic games.
Mate, he'd be like, I'm out of here, man. You guys are crazy, boy. He's not even from Alabama, you know. He's feeling New York or something. It's the only accent I can fucking do. So, Joe Rogan, Merv, Banger or Saint?
I don't know much about Joe Rogan. I know
You're the only person who wide world, mate.
I know you talk about him a lot. I did watch one episode, and funnily enough watched it because I was saying I usually listen to him, but it was by Richard Dawkins, who's like a famous British biologist and a very strict atheist. He's very outspoken about being an atheist and that. That's the only one I watched.
Is that the Celestial Teapot guy?
I'm not sure.
I think it might be. Your brother was telling me about.
Could be. I feel as if Joe Rogan, not knowing much about him, I felt as if he was in the back foot with a wee bit of the science, which is to be expected because he's obviously the other guy's a scientist and that. But I don't have strong views, honestly. I thought that was alright. I probably would watch and listen to more of his stuff, but again, I just try to find time because I've got other podcasts I'm listening to. So I probably will get into it, but I think I'll just go banger because he's American. Just based on that.
Joe Rogan's the one, like, it touches back on that thing that I said earlier, like, I hate with my own podcast, is when you think that people will listen to the ones that they've heard of, you know, they'll look at guests and say, right, I'll listen to that, and I do that with Joe Rogan, see, because
you
there's
have
so
to,
many.
man, because there's so many. Aye, definitely.
You could start listening to one now and you wouldn't finish them by the time you died, you know, if you listen to them like constantly to the end. It's too much.
Is it 2 a week he does or something like that?
I think it's more than that sometimes, Spanks, especially in lockdown. He's like pumping out 3-hour podcasts.
Some production team, man.
Of course he is, but I mean, all as a guy does is trains and then does podcasts and then trains, does podcasts. You know what I mean? So it's all he ever does.
Drinks blood
in his hearts. His programme was good back in the day. Fear Factor, I used to watch that. Did you ever watch that?
I've heard that. I didn't know it was him.
Fear Factor was brilliant. He was the first presenter on Fear Factor, just getting people to do mental shit. It's basically like I'm a celebrity amped up by 100. Do you know what I mean? It's crazy, get people to do crazy stuff for money and things like that. But I really enjoyed that back in the 90s when Joe had hair.
He's the MMA guy as well, isn't he? He's the MMA guy, one of the commentators.
UFC, aye.
I got a coot him up at the boxing for the first time in my life the other night. I don't know if it's called a coot him when it's boxing, but I bet Joshua in round 7-12. 60 quid I win. It's not bad,
there's a YouTuber guy that's taking on, what's his name? We'll probably talk about this when we do a boxing podcast, but there's do you know what I'm talking about? No.
I think
I did see it. Thanks, the guy, he was in the ring. He actually went and fought a guy on professional boxing.
Hang on 2 seconds.
That's happened, I think.
It's not happened.
No, there's one coming up, I'm sure. It's like I wish I knew his name.
Come up in 2 seconds. Floyd Mayweather, so Logan Paul, the YouTube guy,
Paul, that's it,
is going to fight Floyd Mayweather. He's going to get his fucking head kicked in, man.
Aye. He's coming out of there in a coffin, mate.
Definitely. But
Bad
I mean, I think he trains a lot, and the guy, he's fucking ripped. He's massive, I think.
Don't give a
the
fuck.
YouTube boy, but fucking hell, man.
Mayweather will knock his head off.
Bizarrely, he's always talking to Tony Watt on Twitter. That Logan Paul.
Is he? Tony Watt, the ex-Celtic player?
The Celtic player?
The Motherwell
plays with Motherwell now?
The Motherwell player.
Sorry, mate. The
ex-Celtic player. Give him a chance. Try to revive his career and you're talking about him.
He's not going to bag another Barca goal with you.
Tony who? Tony what?
He's always tweeting that Logan Paul when they go back and forth, I'm sure. Maybe we could get him in the ring with Mayweather in his corner, Tony Watt.
I heard a story about Tony Watt that I can't tell you, but he's a wanker. Do you know that? He's a wanker landlord. Do you know that?
Is he?
Aye.
Landlord.
But I can't tell you the story because I'll get leather. Number 3. What did you say?
Neil never said.
Neil.
For me, Joe Rogan, tough one, man. I always do this every week and sit on the fence. For his contribution to the podcast world, he's a saint. But it's a bit of a banger. So I'll just say saint. Because we're talking about podcasts.
Neil, did you comment on?
He's a total banger.
There
He's a
go.
megalomaniac.
A
megalomaniac, and he's a lion. So I mean, like, it's funny you said what you said before about how you can just be open and honest and say what you want, be your own boss. I think he's deliberately being whatever he wants to be, but not actually
being anything.
him, if you know what I mean. Aye. He's being deliberately provocative, and I think that's just the same as anything, really. And I think that kind of fails the true podcast, for me anyway.
I think he's protecting his $100 billion contract.
He's good business, but so was Hitler. You know what I mean? So it's just, and he was a megalomaniac.
Always back to the Hitler.
You know what I mean?
Always back to the Hitler.
It's just someone that's a gift of the gab. He had gift of the gab, and he took over countries, nearly the world. And this guy's trying to do the exact same thing.
He lived, he's like 170 and all this, Joe Rogan, wasn't he? Just, well, maybe no, with all the fucking mad steroids and that.
He's on a heart attack, man, aye.
But he looks great for his age, doesn't he?
Wait, is he?
He's well in his 50s, I would say. He must be mid 55, 50. So we did this all the time and then they're 23. Know what I mean?
I can't believe that you thought Mariah Carey was nearly 70.
I thought Mariah Carey was in her 60s.
I tell Laura like that. She's like, what the fuck is he smoking?
What age is she? She must be in her 50s.
She's only 50, mate.
Oh, yeah.
50, aye.
She's bang on 50.
Or something.
Right, what age is Joe Rogan then? Where are you going?
53.
You've just googled that.
I fucking hasn't been here all the time, mate.
He is 53.
Is he? He looks great for 53. He looks great for 53, man. He does. I hope I look well enough 53 next year. Right, like Melissa Kelly said last week, if anybody calls the next one a banger, we're all fucking fighting, man. We're all fighting in the street. Blind Boy, the Blind Boy boatman, my hero. I'm going Saint straight away, so I'll pass it over to you guys. Whoever wants to jump in, feel brave enough to call Blind Boy a banger. If you want, you'll have Tom Barry's flying column at your door.
Saint, absolute saint. If it wasn't for Blind Boy, I don't think I'd have started a podcast, to be honest.
Aye,
absolutely.
It's actually one of the first podcasts I ever get into. Still listen to it today. I was listening to his one the day with Hosier, the Irish musician, and I just think he's brilliant. Yeah, absolutely brilliant. Don't get me wrong, there's been a time where I've floated in and out of his podcasts.
I think you do that with most, don't you?
Aye, but I always go back to them. I went and seen him just before this lockdown kicked in Glasgow with Limmy.
So did I.
And I thought it was amazing.
I was there myself too, Derek, because nobody else would fucking go with me, because nobody likes him. I wish I'd give you a shout, mate. We could have went out for a few beers. Sitting in there myself like some sado.
I think that was probably the last proper night out.
Did you think it was for me as well? Because it was right at the start.
It was in March, I'm sure, wasn't it?
It was, mate. I think it was the last thing that was happening in there before they closed it. And do you know what I thought about that night? That I didn't realise Limmy was so dark. And well, I know he's dark, but he's dead deep, isn't he?
Yep.
Let's see that he thought he was gay when he was younger and all that. I thought that was quite heavy and stuff like that. They went into about the suicidal thoughts, and I was like, fucking hell, this is really an insight into his mind here. I thought it was going to be more comedy and stuff. It was funny, but it was quite dark, I felt at some points. Don't know if you felt that.
I totally agree, and I thought that Blind Boy was probably the right person to be in front of him speaking about that, because he can bring it back to that mental health aspect. And
absolutely. And he's got that's his big thing in it, Blind Boy, about the mental health, because he suffered with it really badly and got himself out of it with exercise and getting himself a wee bit back on track eating wise and becoming a bit more healthy and stuff. I just love the mystique. See the carrier bag shit and all that. I mean, there must
be genius. That is genius.
Have you seen the documentary? I could talk about more night, by the way, but have you seen the documentary where he shows you how he does his plastic bags?
No.
It's fucking nuts. So he gets sent them all full of his local shops in Cork or wherever it is he's from. I think it's Cork. Limerick, sorry, Limerick. Yeah. And he gets sent boxes and boxes of these carrier bags, and he's got a mannequin's head, and he puts a carrier bag, and the mannequin's head is made for him, so it's moulded in his shape, and he heats it with like a hairdryer or a blowtorch until it all kind of melts into heat, and then he takes it off and then he puts it on. That's fucking nuts. But I love, it's even, obviously I knew about the Rubber Bandits and all that with Horse Outside before I even heard about the podcast, and I knew they were a bit of a gimmicky band and stuff like that, but I still quite liked some of their tunes, to be honest. And then when you're watching it, I'm going, he first started to explain about the polybag. He's like, well, if I started to make it big, I still wanted my anonymity, and I would still have that, you know. But it gets me thinking, there must be people in Limerick who know who the fuck he is, because he talks about, it's a wee place, and he talks about his mall working in House of Frasers and all that, so there must be people that have narrowed it down and know exactly who he is. But he's my hero, man, my hero. Love him, great guy. He's one of the guys you could sit and have a jar with, isn't he?
Definitely. I'll just say Saint straight away. Hero, the fucking best podcast ever for me. It's amazing. It's like therapy listening to it.
I think he means it like that, Spanks.
Yeah, he does. He talks about mental health a lot, and he talks about just fucking really he's just sound as fuck.
Where does he get the hot takes from? But where does he get the hot takes from, man? He talks about, I mean, that monkey, that one I spoke about, the monkey that get dropped off for the American naval ship and then it ended up an alcoholic in Limerick and there's like a statue, and I'm like, that can't be true, and it fucking all is true.
You said to me you think he's sitting there with Wikipedia open, but I think he's very well researched.
He will be, mate. He will be.
Extremely
but actually,
well researched.
See, when I first started listening to it, and because it had the music behind it, I actually thought he would stop it and go and do stuff and then come back, because he would just put the music over at the end. So I felt there was times I could hear some cuts at points, and it might just be him editing it, but I thought he would get to points where he'd go, right, I need to go and look into this for an hour or two, and then he would stop the podcast, go and look into it, and then get his wee spiel together, and then play and record and do it that way. But I'm probably totally wrong.
Well, what did he seem like that live, or did he? Because he seems really informed, man.
He was totally down the line, man. He knew exactly what he was doing at every point, so I'm probably totally wrong, like I'm saying. But I like some of the social activist stuff that he does, the housing programme that he done.
Yeah.
The housing thing was amazing, the way he portrayed that. And
I think because his background and because he's came from, a band like the Rubber Bandits that appealed to so many, primarily working class boys across Ireland, that when he then talks about social issues and political issues, I actually think he's got more clout than a politician going out and trying to say that to somebody.
Or Bono.
And yeah.
And I think the way that he draws attention to issues that he thinks are important, and a lot of the time I think are as well, is a real testament to him,
Yeah, definitely, mate. Totally agree. Neil, do you know who he is?
I would say Saint.
Saint for Blind Boy.
Do you listen to his podcast, mate?
I've only listened to a few. Only since you spoke about it.
So good, man.
Actually.
Brilliant. Absolutely brilliant.
Love it. Merv?
I would say Saint. I don't know loads again about Blind Boy. I know you talk about him a lot. I don't think I've listened to one of these episodes.
Fucking love it, honestly. It's right up your street.
No point in saying that to him about podcasts, so I'm not listening to it.
Aye.
It's another one of the ones I will listen to. The ones I'm listening to now, there's only so many you can listen to at a time, I find. But I heard them on the Adam Buxton one, the one that I'm listening to more than now. And he's good, very much that sort of stream of consciousness, just saying stuff, and I think he's obviously a smart guy.
He's a storyteller, isn't he?
Well read, but some of the stuff I think you maybe need to take with a pinch of salt.
That's why he calls it a hot take, because it could be bullshit.
So it's just that. So that's part of that. Then I mean, the mental health thing as well, he mentioned it in that episode that I listened to, and he's definitely an interesting guy. I mean, plastic bag in your head, that's a wee bit dangerous, I always thought.
He's got holes.
You're always told, don't put a plastic bag in your head.
Dangerous-ification.
You could maybe get a go, Mel, since you don't use the bags for life. You'll be starting off with
I think he did actually mentioning that part of doing that thing with the plastic band in a small way is like reusing them in a good way, kind of thing. So maybe there is some in that. Maybe I should actually kill two birds with one stone, Derek, you know what I mean? cover my face up and then also save the environment at the same time.
Never mind two birds, mate, you're killing all the birds with your attitude.
True, but I know on balance I would say Saint. I think I do like anything I've heard of him, I like him, and you are very enthusiastic, so I can see he's obviously got a lot of good things, and I'm sure he'll get more of them.
So good, man. I guarantee all of it.
His best song is He's in the Ra. Have you not seen that? He's ever seen that? It's hilarious, man. Peter Mandelson, he's in the rat. Margaret Thatcher, she's in the rat. It comes out with all these random faces. I love it.
And actually, one of his best podcasts, I would say, is one of the live ones that he done with Bernadette Devlin. Don't know if you listened to it.
Amazing, Derek.
Fantastic,
absolutely incredible, man. Aye, some story hers, isn't it?
What an incredible woman, got the keys of the city to New York and handed it over to the Black Panthers. It's amazing.
Unbelievable, innit? Aye, amazing. And they done the tapes as well. She was part of the tapes, weren't they? I actually started listening to some of that stuff on YouTube. That's very interesting, man. Because they weren't allowed to release them until they had all died. Or something along those lines. I think it was something like that. Getting that wrong probably, but someday there was one of them that had to die before they were released, and he died like 2 years ago or something like that. And I was listening to him, and it's incredible. Some of the stuff is incredible for back then. Scary, but could be heading back to those days with the old Brexit and the hard borders.
Oh, Jesus.
There we go. That'll lighten the mood, lads. There we go. That's your podcast for you. Thanks very much, Derek.
Derek, thanks very much for coming on, man.
Thanks a lot,
Not
Derek.
at all. No, I really enjoyed that. Thanks for having us.
Thanks very much for listening to the Carbon Copy COVID Curer podcast. We'll be back soon with another ill-informed, chat-filled episode. Why not tell us what you think by email? inquiry@carboncopymusic.band or visit our website, carboncopymusic.band. And if you're feeling really generous and you haven't already, please give us a like on our Facebook, facebook.com/carboncopy4, and even our Instagram, @carboncopyweddingband. Thanks again. No bangers or ham during the make of this podcast. Carbon Copy deserve the right more than anything they like, and they will. Thank you.